In the golden heart of ancient Babylon, where towering ziggurats kissed the heavens and the scent of incense filled the air, a single man stood out among the mighty. Daniel, a servant of the Most High God. The empire's power shimmered under King Darius, whose banners fluttered proudly across the land. Yet within the court's marble halls, envy festered like a shadow. The royal advisers, jealous of Daniel's wisdom and favor with the king, whispered venom in secret corners. Daniel had risen far beyond what any foreigner should have. He interpreted dreams, deciphered mysteries, and walked with a calm that unsettled those who thrived on chaos. His devotion to his God made him untouchable, until the jealous hearts around him decided to strike. One fateful evening, as the last rays of the sun bathed the city in bronze light, the conspirators approached King Darius with flattery dripping from their tongues. "O king, live forever," they said, bowing deeply. "We propose a royal decree that for 30 days no one may pray to any god or man except to you, O king. Whoever disobeys shall be cast into the den of lions." King Darius, pleased by their praise yet unaware of their deceit, sealed the law with his royal signet. And so it was written, a law that could not be undone. Yet Daniel's faith was unshakable. When he heard of the decree, he did not tremble. Instead, he opened his window toward Jerusalem as he always had and prayed 3 times a day. Below the window, hidden in the shadows, eyes watched him. The trap was set. That night the conspirators hurried to the king, their faces alight with false righteousness. "Your Majesty," one of them said, "Daniel, the exile from Judah, pays no heed to your decree. He still prays to his God." King Darius froze. His heart sank. He loved Daniel like a brother, but the law of the Medes and Persians could not be changed. He spent the rest of the day searching for a way to save him. But as the sun fell and the torches were lit, the time ran out. With a heavy heart, the king summoned Daniel. The royal guards seized him, the sound of their armor echoing through the night. And as they led him toward the dark pit where the lions roared below, King Darius whispered, his voice trembling, "May your God whom you serve so faithfully rescue you." The stone lid began to move. The grinding sound of the massive stone echoed like thunder as it rolled over the entrance of the pit. A shiver ran through the earth. Then, silence. Only the distant growls of the lions could be heard, echoing from below like the voice of death itself. Torches flickered in the hands of the guards as King Darius turned away, his royal robe brushing against the sand. His face was pale, etched with regret. He returned to his palace, but no music comforted him, no meal passed his lips. The laughter of the court had vanished. Even the air seemed to mourn. Meanwhile, in the darkness beneath the earth, Daniel stood motionless. His eyes adjusted slowly. Around him, golden eyes gleamed from the shadows. The lions. Muscles rippled under their fur as they prowled closer, their low growls rumbling like thunderclouds before a storm. Each step they took drew the scent of his fear closer. Daniel's heart raced, yet he did not flee. He lifted his eyes to the heavens, though no light reached him, and whispered a prayer that pierced through the darkness. "O Lord, my God, whom I serve, you are my refuge. Deliver me, as you delivered our fathers from the fire and from the flood." And then, silence. A light, faint as dawn, shimmered before him. It grew warm and radiant until a form appeared within it. An angel. Wings like molten gold spread wide, and his presence drove the shadows away. "Do not fear, Daniel," the angel said, his voice calm yet powerful. "The Lord has sent me to shut the mouths of the lions." The beasts halted. Their snarls softened to quiet huffs, and their eyes lost their hunger. One by one they laid down, encircling Daniel like gentle sentinels. The once deadly pit became a resting place of peace. Up above, the stars continued their silent watch. King Darius paced through the night, each hour dragging like a century. He refused wine, refused sleep. All he could hear were the echoes of the past day, Daniel's calm face, his unwavering faith, and his own helpless promise, "May your God rescue you." And then the first light of dawn broke over Babylon. The king rose from his throne before the sun had fully climbed, his robe disheveled, his eyes heavy but hopeful. He ran toward the lion's den, the sound of his sandals slapping the stone floor, his guards struggling to keep up. He reached the pit and shouted down, his voice trembling with both fear and desperate hope. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" For a moment there was only silence. Then a voice rose from the depths, steady, alive, and full of faith. "O King, live forever." For a heartbeat, King Darius froze, unsure if the voice was a memory or a miracle. But as Daniel's words echoed from below, his heart leapt within him. He rushed closer to the edge, kneeling beside the stone rim, peering into the dim pit where death had surely reigned. "My God sent his angel," Daniel's voice continued, calm and steady, "and he shut the lions' mouths. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And, O King, I have done no wrong before you." The king's eyes widened in awe. He turned to his guards, his voice breaking with urgency. "Remove the stone! Quickly!" The soldiers heaved the massive slab aside, and beams of dawnlight poured into the darkness below. Dust rose as ropes were thrown down. Slowly, almost reverently, they pulled Daniel upward. When his feet touched solid ground, the court gasped. His robes were spotless. Not a single scratch marked his skin. Even the scent of the pit did not cling to him. King Darius stepped forward, tears glimmering in his eyes. "Daniel, your God truly is the living God." But as joy flooded the king's heart, another feeling rose alongside it, righteous fury. He turned toward the treacherous advisers who had plotted Daniel's downfall. Their confident smirks had vanished. Their faces had gone pale as parchment. "Bring them," commanded the king, his voice like thunder rolling across the plains. "Bring the men who conspired against Daniel, and their families. They shall face the punishment they sought for the innocent." The guards seized them before they could flee. The conspirators cried out, their protests swallowed by the clamor of armor and shouting. The king's decree was carried out, the stone was rolled aside once more, and the traitors were cast into the pit they had dug for another. The lions who had lain still through the night suddenly roared, a deafening, bone-shaking sound that echoed across Babylon. The ground trembled as justice was served. When silence returned, King Darius turned once more to Daniel, the morning sun now shining full upon them. "From this day," he declared, "a new decree shall be made throughout my kingdom." He raised his hand toward the heavens. "People of every nation and tongue will know, Daniel as God is the one true and living God, who endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion has no end." The crowd bowed in awe as the words carried across the city, from the palace terraces to the streets below. And there stood Daniel, humble, radiant in the morning light, a symbol of faith that no law, no lion, and no darkness could ever defeat. But as the city rejoiced, Daniel's eyes turned eastward, toward Jerusalem. The longing of his heart stirred once more. The exile still continued, but his hope burned brighter than ever, for he knew now, faith could tame even the fiercest of beasts. As the sun climbed higher above Babylon's shining towers, Daniel stood upon the palace terrace, the wind tugging gently at his robe. Below him, the great city awakened, merchants shouting in the markets, the sound of chariots echoing across the stone streets, the golden temple tops gleaming like fire. Yet Daniel's heart was far from the noise of empire. His eyes gazed beyond the horizon, beyond the Euphrates River, to the land of his fathers, Jerusalem, still in ruins. He whispered softly, "O Lord, when will the hearts of your people return to you?" King Darius approached quietly behind him. Gone was the regal sternness of the ruler, in its place a man humbled by the power of the divine. "You have opened my eyes, Daniel," he said. "Your faith has shown me what no idol, no law, no human wisdom could ever reveal." Daniel turned, bowing slightly. "All glory belongs to the Most High, my king. He raises kings and brings them low. He delivers those who trust in him." Darius nodded, then looked toward the horizon as well. "Tell me, Daniel, this God of yours, does he speak still?" Daniel smiled faintly. "He always speaks, O king, but only those who listen with humble hearts can hear his voice." The king said no more, but his silence spoke of wonder and fear. For even the mightiest ruler knew now that there was a power greater than the throne. That night, as the palace grew quiet, Daniel returned to his chamber. He knelt before the open window, the same one through which he had once prayed in defiance of the decree. The stars shone above, countless and brilliant, the same stars that had watched over Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He began to pray. "O Lord my God, you have delivered me from the pit of lions, from the jealousy of men, and from the hands of kings. Let your mercy now reach your people. Forgive our sins, heal our land, and bring us home to Zion." And as he prayed, something stirred within the stillness, a presence, vast and radiant, like a breath of eternity sweeping through the room. Daniel trembled, his heart quickened. He lifted his eyes, and before him appeared a vision, the heavens opening, and a figure clothed in light brighter than the morning star. "Daniel, beloved of God," the voice said, echoing like the sound of many waters, "you have been faithful through trial and through fire. The Lord has seen your tears and heard your prayers." Daniel bowed low, his face to the floor. "Speak, my lord, for your servant listens." And the vision grew, vast and terrible, filled with symbols of kingdoms rising and falling, of beasts, of angels, and of judgment. The fate of nations unfolded before his eyes. He saw empires crumble, kings fade into dust, and at the end, a throne of fire and light, and one like the Son of Man, whose kingdom would never end. When the vision faded, Daniel was left trembling, weak but awestruck. He whispered, "Your will be done, O Lord, in heaven and on earth." Outside, a lion roared in the distance, not in threat, but as if the wild itself bowed to the God who saves. Daniel lay upon the cold marble floor, breath shallow, his body trembling under the weight of what he had seen. The glow of the vision still shimmered faintly in the air, like golden dust suspended in the silence of eternity. Outside, the first gusts of dawn swept through Babylon, carrying the smell of myrrh and cedar from the palace gardens. The city, unaware of heaven's revelations, awakened to its ordinary rhythm. But Daniel's world had forever changed. He rose slowly, his hands shaking, his heart pounding with awe. The voice of the angel still echoed in his mind. "You are greatly loved." Those words, gentle yet more powerful than thunder, filled him with peace. Even among the ruins of exile, even beneath the shadow of empires, Daniel knew that the Creator of all things had not forgotten his servant. He washed his face, put on his robe, and walked into the open court. The air was crisp. The morning light spilled across the polished stone like liquid gold. As he stepped outside, one of the king's young attendants hurried toward him. "Master Daniel, the king requests your presence." Daniel followed, his pace steady though his thoughts were far away, still clinging to the images of fire, thrones, and angels. When he entered the great hall, King Darius stood surrounded by nobles and scribes. Yet, as soon as he saw Daniel, the king dismissed them all with a wave of his hand. The hall emptied quickly, leaving only the two men beneath the vast painted ceiling. Darius approached. "You look as though you have walked through another world," he said quietly. Daniel bowed his head. "Perhaps I have, my king." "Was it another vision?" Darius asked, half in wonder, half in fear. Daniel nodded slowly. "The Lord has shown me what is to come. Empires will rise and empires will fall. Even Babylon's glory will pass like the evening shadow. But his kingdom," he lifted his eyes, "will endure forever." The king's expression hardened for a moment, the pride of a ruler wrestling with the humility of a man. Then he sighed, placing his hand upon Daniel's shoulder. "If what you say is true," he said, "then may I learn to serve this eternal king as you do." Daniel smiled faintly. "All who seek him with a sincere heart will find him, O king." A hush fell between them. The golden light of morning poured through the windows, painting both men in the same glow, ruler and prophet, servant and sovereign, united under the watch of heaven. Outside, the river flowed gently, the same river that reflected the walls of Babylon and whispered of passing ages. Daniel looked toward it and thought of home once more. Though his body was old, his spirit still longed for Zion. He knew his days were nearing their end, but he also knew this. His story, God's story would outlive him. For generations to come, the tale of faith among lions and light among darkness would echo through the hearts of the faithful. And somewhere beyond time itself, the roar of lions faded into a hymn of praise. Years passed, and Babylon's glory began to fade like the last embers of a dying fire. The proud city that once ruled the world was crumbling beneath the weight of its own arrogance. But Daniel, the exile, the prophet, the man who walked with God, endured. His hair had turned silver, his hands bore the tremor of age, yet his eyes still carried that same fire of unshakable faith. The courtyards whispered his name as a living legend, the man who had survived the lions and seen the mysteries of heaven. One cool evening, Daniel stood upon the palace balcony overlooking the Euphrates River as it shimmered beneath the moonlight. Babylon's towers were reflected in the dark water, trembling like ghosts. A gentle voice called behind him, "Daniel, my master." It was Ashpenaz, the old servant who had once overseen the young captives from Judah decades ago, now a frail man himself, leaning on a wooden staff. Daniel smiled. "You still walk beside me after all these years?" Ashpenaz chuckled weakly. "And still you outlive kings and conquerors, my friend. Darius is gone, and now Cyrus of Persia rules the empire. The world changes, yet you remain." Daniel turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, where the faint outline of Jerusalem seemed to live only in memory. "The world changes," he said softly, "but God's word never does." They stood together in silence, two old men surrounded by the ghosts of history. The night wind carried with it the sound of music, Persian flutes, laughter, and feasts in the distance, yet none of it reached Daniel's heart. "Do you ever tire, Daniel?" Ashpenaz asked suddenly. "Of visions, of kings, of wars, of waiting?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered, "I tire, but I do not lose hope. Every vision I've seen, every trial I've faced has led to one truth: the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men." Ashpenaz nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Then your life has not been in vain." Daniel placed a trembling hand upon his friend's shoulder. "Nor has yours, old friend. You were kind when others were cruel. You helped me when I was but a boy in a strange land. You too have served the Lord, though you did not know it." The two men shared a long, quiet smile, the kind born from years of pain, wisdom, and faith. At that moment, a trumpet sounded in the distance, the Persian heralds announcing a royal decree. The sound echoed across the rooftops like thunder. Daniel and Ashpenaz looked toward the sound. From the great hall, a messenger approached, bowing low. "Daniel, servant of the Most High, the decree of King Cyrus has been issued. The exiles of Judah are free to return and rebuild the temple of their God." Daniel's breath caught. His eyes widened, filling with tears. "Home," he whispered, his voice trembling. "After 70 years and home." Ashpenaz clasped his hand, his voice breaking. "The promise has come true." Daniel fell to his knees, lifting his hands to heaven. "O Lord, you are faithful through generations. You shut the mouths of lions and opened the gates of kings." The stars above seemed to burn brighter, as if the heavens themselves rejoiced. The announcement spread like wildfire through the streets of Babylon. Among the exiles, joy erupted. Tears, laughter, and shouts of praise filled the night. Old men embraced one another, mothers lifted their children high, and songs of Zion rose once again after 70 long bitter years of silence. The announcement spread like wildfire through the streets of Babylon. Among the exiles, joy erupted. Tears, laughter, and shouts of praise filled the night. Old men embraced one another, mothers lifted their children high, and songs of Zion rose once again after 70 long bitter years of silence. But amid the celebration, Daniel stood still. The moonlight bathed him in silver as his heart wrestled between two worlds, the joy of a promise fulfilled, and the weight of age that chained his body to Babylon's stones. He longed to walk once more upon the hills of Jerusalem, to see the city of God restored with his own eyes. Yet he knew deep within his spirit, his journey was nearing its end. That night, Daniel sat alone by the riverbank where reeds swayed and the waters whispered softly against the stones. The stars shimmered above, their reflections trembling upon the dark surface. He whispered a psalm of his people. "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. The sound of his voice blended with the wind, gentle and solemn. He closed his eyes, and memories flooded him, of his youth when he was first taken captive, of King Nebuchadnezzar's fiery temper, of the mysterious handwriting on the wall, of Darius's anguished eyes above the lion's pit, and of the shining angel who stood beside him in the darkness. Every moment, every trial, had been a thread in a divine tapestry. He saw it now, the pattern, the purpose, the hand of God guiding it all. As he reflected, the reeds rustled suddenly. A presence filled the air, not of man, but of heaven. Daniel looked up, and once again, light broke through the darkness. An angelic figure appeared before him, radiant as moonfire, clothed in white linen, his eyes burning with a holy flame. "Daniel, greatly beloved," the voice said, warm and mighty, "fear not." Daniel bowed low, trembling, his forehead to the earth. "My Lord," he whispered, "why does heaven visit me again?" The angel's gaze was gentle yet solemn. "The Lord has seen your years of faithfulness. Your prayers have been heard in heaven from the day you first set your heart to understand." The angel lifted his hand toward the heavens. "You shall not see the rebuilding of Jerusalem with mortal eyes, but your name shall endure among your people forever. And when the Ancient of Days sits upon his throne, you will rise to your inheritance at the end of days." Daniel's heart was filled with peace, deep, endless peace. He whispered, "Then let your servant rest, O Lord, until that day comes." The angel smiled, and as the vision faded, the river shimmered once more with reflected starlight. The night wind carried the faintest whisper, "Well done, faithful servant." Daniel sat quietly, tears of both sorrow and joy tracing down his face. He looked once more toward the east, toward home. "Even if my feet never touch its soil," he said softly, "my spirit belongs there, for the God of Israel lives forever." The wind stirred, as if in answer, and a single white feather drifted down beside him, glowing faintly before disappearing into the rippling waters. But amid the celebration, Daniel stood still. The moonlight bathed him in silver as his heart wrestled between two worlds, the joy of a promise fulfilled and the weight of age that chained his body to Babylon's stones. He longed to walk once more upon the hills of Jerusalem, to see the city of God restored with his own eyes. Yet he knew deep within his spirit, his journey was nearing its end. That night, Daniel sat alone by the riverbank where reeds swayed and the waters whispered softly against the stones. The stars shimmered above, their reflections trembling upon the dark surface. He whispered a psalm of his people. "By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept when we remembered Zion." The sound of his voice blended with the wind, gentle and solemn. He closed his eyes and memories flooded him, of his youth when he was first taken captive, of King Nebuchadnezzar's fiery temper, of the mysterious handwriting on the wall, of Darius's anguished eyes above the lion's pit, and of the shining angel who stood beside him in the darkness. Every moment, every trial, had been a thread in a divine tapestry. He saw it now, the pattern, the purpose, the hand of God guiding it all. As he reflected, the reeds rustled suddenly. A presence filled the air, not of man, but of heaven. Daniel looked up, and once again light broke through the darkness. An angelic figure appeared before him, radiant as moonfire, clothed in white linen, his eyes burning with a holy flame. "Daniel, greatly beloved," the voice said, warm and mighty, "fear not." Daniel bowed low, trembling, his forehead to the earth. "My Lord," he whispered, "why does heaven visit me again?" The angel's gaze was gentle yet solemn. "The Lord has seen your years of faithfulness. Your prayers have been heard in heaven from the day you first set your heart to understand." The angel lifted his hand toward the heavens. "You shall not see the rebuilding of Jerusalem with mortal eyes, but your name shall endure among your people forever. And when the Ancient of Days sits upon his throne, you will rise to your inheritance at the end of days." Daniel's heart was filled with peace, deep, endless peace. He whispered, "Then let your servant rest, O Lord, until that day comes." The angel smiled, and as the vision faded, the river shimmered once more with reflected starlight. The night wind carried the faintest whisper, "Well done, faithful servant." Daniel sat quietly, tears of both sorrow and joy tracing down his face. He looked once more toward the east, toward home. "Even if my feet never touch its soil," he said softly, "my spirit belongs there, for the God of Israel lives forever." The wind stirred as if in answer, and a single white feather drifted down beside him, glowing faintly before disappearing into the rippling waters. Time passed, and Babylon changed hands once more. The mighty walls that had once seemed eternal now bore cracks and vines, their grandeur fading beneath the dust of years. Merchants still passed through the markets, and children still played in the courtyards, but the glory of the empire had vanished like smoke in the wind. In the quiet of the royal gardens, however, one place remained untouched. A small shaded grove where a palm tree grew tall beside the Euphrates River. Beneath it lay a stone, carved with words in both Hebrew and Aramaic. "Here rests Daniel, servant of the living God, faithful in captivity, steadfast in faith." The wind carried whispers through the branches, like soft hymns sung by unseen voices. Travelers who passed by would often stop and bow their heads, for it was said that peace dwelt in that place. Some swore they could feel a warmth in the air, a sense of presence, as though heaven itself lingered there. And though Daniel's body slept beneath the earth, his story had already crossed mountains and generations. Far beyond Babylon, in the land of Judah, the people of Israel had returned. The sound of chisels and hammers rang out in Jerusalem as they rebuilt the temple. Stones were set, altars were raised, and priests once again lifted their hands to bless the name of the Lord. Old men told the young of the prophet who had defied kings, faced lions, and seen the visions of God. Mothers sang his name in lullabies, and the children of Israel grew up knowing that no power of earth or darkness could stand against faith. And through the ages, his words lived on, written in scrolls, carried by prophets, studied by scholars, and whispered in the prayers of those who faced their own lions. Centuries later, when kingdoms rose and fell and empires forged their emblems upon the earth, the tale of Daniel still burned bright, a light in the shadow, a voice in the silence. Because Daniel's story was not merely one of survival. It was a testament, a declaration, that the God who rules the heavens walks beside his faithful, even in the darkest dens of life. And in that grove by the river, where his tomb lay hidden among the trees, travelers sometimes heard the faint echo of a lion's roar, not of terror, but of triumph, a sound that reminded the world that faith still conquers fear, that light still silences darkness, that the living God still reigns forever. And above that ancient city, where dust met the wind and the river met the stars, peace lingered, eternal, unbroken. The legacy of Daniel, the prophet of courage and vision, lived on in every believer who dared to trust God against all odds. For though kingdoms fade and stones crumble, the truth remains. Faith can still shut the mouths of lions. Many years after Daniel's passing, Babylon was nothing more than a legend. Its towers fallen, its gardens overgrown, its rivers whispering only to the ghosts of history. Yet in the land of Judah, Daniel's legacy was alive, burning like a lamp in the hearts of his people. Children gathered in the evenings by the flickering firelight as elders told the story of a man taken captive as a boy who never bowed to idols, of a prophet who prayed when praying was forbidden, of a servant of God who stood among lions and walked out untouched. And as each word echoed into the night, hope stirred again in the hearts of those who listened. One such child was Ezra, the young scribe who sat with wide eyes, hanging on every word. The story of Daniel filled him with courage, shaping his dreams and kindling a faith that would one day restore his nation's covenant with God. Years later, when Ezra would rise to teach the people the law of Moses, he would often speak Daniel's name. "Remember," he would tell them, "our fathers stood firm in exile. When the world decreed silence, Daniel prayed louder. When death roared, God answered. So must we." And across generations, the message never faded. Through centuries of trials, through foreign rule, persecution, and silence, Daniel's story became more than a tale. It became a pillar, a reminder that righteousness was not measured by survival, but by faithfulness. Even among distant lands far from Jerusalem, men and women spoke of Daniel. His writings traveled across nations, prophecies of beasts, kingdoms, and the coming of a greater king, one who would rule forever. And in time, those ancient scrolls reached a new age, an age where empires again sought to crush truth beneath power. Yet even then, the story of Daniel whispered courage to those who would not bow. Centuries later, when shepherds gazed at the night sky outside Bethlehem, the heavens burst open with light, and the promise Daniel once saw in visions began to unfold: the Son of Man. He had glimpsed in fire, and glory had come, not in thunder, but in humility, not in might, but in mercy. The same God who sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths had now sent his Son to open the gates of salvation. And in that holy moment, beneath the stars of Israel, Daniel's faith, unbroken through time, found its fulfillment. For the kingdom he had foreseen, the one that would never end, was being born among men. The prophecies of Babylon met the promise of Bethlehem, and the story that began in exile would find its true ending in eternity. The wind over the desert carried Daniel's name still, a whisper among the sands. Faith endures, truth prevails, the living God reigns forever. The city of Babylon, once echoing with the clamor of kings and merchants, now lay silent beneath the scorching sun. Its golden streets were cracked, its grand temples toppled, yet in the hearts of those who remembered, its story lived on. Among them were the scribes and priests who preserved Daniel's writings, his visions, his prayers, his courage in the face of death. These scrolls traveled far, crossing deserts and rivers, reaching lands that Daniel himself could never have imagined. Generations read of the lion's den and of God's angelic deliverance. They marveled at the visions of beasts and thrones, at kingdoms rising and falling, at the eternal kingdom promised to all who trusted in the Most High. Young children in distant villages clutched the scrolls, eyes wide with wonder, repeating the words of the prophet, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." Among them was Levi, a boy who often dreamed of the heavens opening and angels descending. When trouble arose in his village, famine, fear, or the threat of enemies, he remembered Daniel. He remembered that faith could overcome even the darkest of dangers, and in the palace of a distant king, hundreds of miles from Babylon, scholars debated the meaning of Daniel's visions. They argued over beasts and horns, kingdoms and dominions, yet none could deny the wisdom that had carried him through exile and peril. The story of Daniel was no longer just a tale of survival. It was a beacon, a standard of hope for those who faced impossible odds, a shield for those who prayed in secret, a reminder that the God who watches over the faithful is never far away. Yet even as centuries passed, one truth remained clear. The courage of a single man, faithful in exile, steadfast in prayer, unbroken by kings or lions, could inspire countless generations to trust in the living God. In the quiet of a starry night, far from the ruins of Babylon and far from Jerusalem, a shepherd raised his eyes to the heavens and whispered the words he had learned from his elders. Just as Daniel trusted in God, so shall we. Even when darkness surrounds us, even when the roar of lions threatens, the Lord is our refuge. He delivers those who place their faith in him. And somewhere beyond time, Daniel's spirit seemed to whisper back, a voice carried on the wind, gentle yet unyielding. Stand firm, pray always, fear not, for the God who saves endures forever. The stars shimmered in response, and the world, vast and uncertain, felt a spark of hope that no empire could extinguish. The centuries rolled on like the waters of the Euphrates, carrying Daniel's story across lands and generations. His name became a symbol, not of wealth or power, but of unwavering faith, a light for those who walked in shadow. In Jerusalem, the temple had been rebuilt. Its stones gleamed under the sun and its altars smoked with incense once again. The people of Israel gathered to remember their God, and among the scrolls read in the synagogues, Daniel's words echoed, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for he has delivered his servants." Teachers used his story to inspire young minds. Fathers whispered it to their children at night. Mothers sang it softly to lull them to sleep. And even kings in distant lands would hear of the man who faced lions and stood unharmed. In the quiet of the desert, travelers paused at ruins once known as Babylon. Some said the walls still whispered stories of the past, tales of kings and prophets, of fires and lions, and of one man who had refused to bow except to God. One evening, under the vast expanse of a starlit sky, a young boy named Micah knelt by a river. He had been taught of Daniel by his elders and had faced his own fears: bullies in the village, harsh winters, and the uncertainty of growing up in troubled times. He whispered a prayer like Daniel had, trusting in a God he had never seen but had learned to believe in. "O Lord, deliver me and guide me as you did Daniel. Make me strong in faith, courageous in heart, and steadfast in all I do." A gentle breeze swept across the river, rustling the reeds and stirring the sand. Micah shivered, feeling a presence beyond his understanding, as though the heavens themselves had heard his plea. And in that moment, Daniel's legacy whispered once more across the ages, teaching the young boy the same truth it had taught countless others: faith is stronger than fear. Prayer is mightier than threats. The living God protects those who trust him. Far above, the stars shone brighter than ever, carrying the promise of hope. The angels, unseen by human eyes, watched over those who followed the path of righteousness. Daniel's story, though rooted in the past, was alive, flowing through every heart that dared to believe, every soul that refused to bow to injustice, every voice that lifted prayer in the darkest hour. For the lions of the world, fierce and terrifying, had no power over the faithful, and in the quiet moments between dusk and dawn, one could almost hear a soft roar in the distance, not of terror but of triumph, echoing from the dens of history to the corners of the earth. The story of Daniel traveled far beyond the lands of Judah and Babylon. Caravans carried the scrolls through deserts, across mountains and along rivers, reaching distant kingdoms where kings and scholars marveled at the tales. They read of dreams that only God could reveal, of wisdom that surpassed human understanding, and of courage that refused to bow to fear. The lion's den became more than a story. It became a symbol, proof that faith could conquer death itself. In one faraway city, a young scholar named Tobias pored over the scrolls late into the night. Candlelight flickered across his desk as he traced the words with his finger, imagining the shadowed den, the glowing angel, and Daniel standing fearless among the beasts. He whispered to himself, "If Daniel could stand before lions and kings without fear, then I can stand for truth in my own life." And so the legacy of the prophet inspired courage in hearts far from Babylon, in places he would never see, in lives he could never touch, except through the enduring power of his story. Yet even as the world changed, as empires rose and fell, Daniel's faithfulness remained a fixed point. Scholars debated his visions, kings sought his wisdom, and the faithful prayed his prayers. His example crossed cultures and languages, proving that true courage is universal and eternal. One night Tobias looked up at the stars and thought of Daniel. "The God who shut the lions' mouths," he whispered, "still watches over us today." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of distant lands and ancient times. Somewhere unseen, the voice of Daniel seemed to answer in a whisper. "Stand firm. Fear not. Trust in the Lord, for he is eternal, and his kingdom endures forever." And in that moment, Tobias felt strength he had never known. A fire kindled within his soul. He rose from his desk and vowed to live with the courage of Daniel, to trust in God when the world demanded fear, and to walk faithfully, no matter the trials ahead. The scrolls of Daniel continued to move from hand to hand, generation to generation. Lions roared in memory, but the faithful knew the truth. God's power is greater than any danger. His protection surpasses any threat, and his kingdom will never be shaken. Even in lands far removed from Babylon, Daniel's courage lived on, an eternal echo of the faith that conquers all. In the years that followed, Daniel's story became a cornerstone of hope for the people of Israel and beyond. Synagogues echoed with his prayers, schools taught his unwavering courage, and families passed down his legacy like a treasured heirloom. Even the mighty kings who ruled after Darius and Cyrus spoke of him in hushed reverence. They marveled at how one man, exiled in a foreign land, had wielded wisdom greater than their counselors and endured a trial that would have broken the strongest of hearts. Yet Daniel's greatest gift was not the admiration of kings nor the fulfillment of prophecies. It was the example of steadfast faith. Across the centuries, faithful hearts remembered to pray when the law forbids, to stand when the world demands surrender, to trust when all seems lost. In distant lands, children would draw lions in the sand, imagining Daniel standing unafraid. Travelers spoke of him as a living legend, though long gone from the earth. Priests would light lamps in his memory, recounting the night when the Most High sent an angel to shut the mouths of the lions. In one small village, a young girl named Hannah knelt by a quiet stream, the scroll of Daniel open before her. She traced the words with tiny fingers, her eyes wide with awe. "If Daniel could face lions," she whispered, "then I can face my fears too." The wind rustled the trees as if to answer her. Somewhere in the unseen heavens, the spirit of the faithful prophet seemed to smile, and the lesson traveled with the wind across mountains and seas, into the hearts of every soul that dared to trust. Daniel's story became a bridge, connecting generations, inspiring courage, and teaching that even in exile, even in danger, God's hand is ever present. The lions of Babylon were long gone, the palace in ruins, the ziggurats crumbled to dust. But the roar of faith that Daniel had inspired echoed forever. For even when kingdoms fall and empires vanish, the courage born of unwavering trust in God never fades. And as the sun set over distant lands, bathing the earth in gold, one could almost hear a whisper carried by the wind. "Stand firm, pray always, fear not. For I am with you, even unto the end of the age."